Hey, this is Rob. This is episode 70 of the Folly Coffee Podcast. Let's get it brewing. All right. So after a 1 hour detour from the roaster into here, involving a dead phone, a broken charger, and me wondering, did I just lose this person forever? I'm with Madi, and this is really cool. So you reach out to me via email, just, hey, I'm going to be taking over a shop in April of next year is what you're aiming for?
Yep. And
I was like, this might be a weird question, but like, hey, do you want to come down and taste some coffees? But would you want to record a podcast episode about it? Because you're in a unique position that you're still, today is December 10th, I think, or around there.
11th.
Close, okay. Hey, within 1 day. It's not bad for me. So we're December 11th, and you're opening your shop in April. I was like, this could be kind of a cool opportunity to go, like, what are all the steps at this point in the planning process to take over a shop? And then I want to do a follow-up episode after you open, and we can talk about all the things that are happening in that 4-month span, which I'm sure there's going to be some things that are kind of unpredictable, but
most definitely.
Yeah, but I'm really curious because we just met for the first time today, tasting coffees down at the roaster. And so I'm really curious about your background. And so you're going to be taking over an existing coffee shop in April, rebranding, redoing the entire place over. And so I'm curious how you get to a point there, how you came to this, and like your background in coffee, just like all the way back from the beginning.
Yeah, so I guess total I have about 3 years of like coffee-ish experience, like being a barista, and I currently manage a coffee shop in northern Minnesota. And so I guess it started just like needing a job in high school and then going, oh, hey, this is actually a really cool community that you can be involved in. It's just like working in a coffee shop. It seems so simple, but there's actually a lot of connection that can be made in the community with that. And I just kind of fell in love with that and decided, hey, I don't think I would be doing anything else with my life other than running a business. That's really what I'm gravitating towards. So what other business to run but a coffee shop? It makes perfect sense. So that's kind of where I started and running with it now.
Yeah. And was this something you were seeking out when this opportunity came up to be able to take over this shop, or was this something that kind of fell into your lap? Because I'm sure a lot of people, especially, this is a coffee podcast, so I was saying before we got on, I assume there's some people that have that kind of thing in the back of their head that like they'd love to open their own shop or roaster someday. Was this something you were actively seeking out, that I'm going to go find a space and go find a shop, and you started planning, or how did this opportunity come about?
So I guess backtracking a little bit, I stopped working in the coffee industry for a while, and I was like, wow, I miss it so much. I want to be back involved in that. And I long-term plan, I was thinking 7 years out, I want to own my own place. And so I just kind of started talking about it to people like, oh, hey, I really want to do this with my life one day. And then I ended up moving back to my hometown and working at the original coffee shop I started at, and kind of just still talking about it to people. And then my manager at the time was like, oh, you really want to do this? Why don't you take my place as manager and kind of learn the ins and outs of this? Because she didn't want to do that anymore. It wasn't her direction. And she was like, this is a great opportunity for you and a great opportunity for me to kind of win-win. You get experience and I get to leave. And so as I started managing and learning more about the industry, I was realizing how much more realistic it was going to be to do it in the next year, which came to 6 months, which came to 4 months. And then I was like, okay, let's get into the logistics of what you need to do. My boss right now has been very helpful with mentoring me in a way of like, this is what you need to do. This is your building options. This is pretty much how you get started, vendors that you need. And I was kind of lucky in how it did kind of fall in my lap in a way. So it started with, just kind of vocalizing it and just people gravitating towards that initial idea.
Yeah, and I urge people who have like a dream or a vision like this, it's like, put it out there. Even if you're like, I'm going to be doing this 7 years like you initially did, I think when people know what you're about, or that you're like, hey, I want to do this, when opportunities arise, you're probably going to be one of the first people to think about. And that sounds like what's happening here.
Exactly.
So this location pops up that some of the details you can't go into yet for legal reasons, because it's not inked, and so we're going to keep some of the details vague here, and we can hopefully do a follow-up episode and go through all
hash that all out later
and do all the fun stuff. But How did you find this opportunity of the space you'll be taking over, and like how quickly did that develop?
So thinking back, again, yeah, it just kind of fell in my lap very quickly. Like I became manager of this coffee shop, started getting more involved with that community, and within like the first like 3 months of being in this position is when it kind of fell in my lap. And it started off like a joke, like, oh, haha, you're going to buy this place from me one day, right? Like, that's your plan, right? And I was like, sure. And then
and you're just like, yes.
I was like, yeah, like, you're joking, but that's what's going to happen. And then one day he was kind of like, so are you serious? Like, is this a joke, or are we actually doing this? And I was like, let's actually do it. And how soon? And originally we were like, 2 years. Like, we'll wait for some legal stuff to settle down, wait for you to have some money. And then the more we talked about it, the more we found out, oh, hey, we could make this happen in 5 months if we really put effort into it. And so that's how that kind of happened. Just being in the community, meeting the right people. Honestly, yeah, just meeting the right people at the right place at the right time. It's kind of luck in a way.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you still got to put it out and show that, hey, I do actually want to do this seriously. Yeah. It's not just like a joke. Yeah,
and that's like, I feel the same way a lot of the time. It's like so much of this is just luck, but it's being in a position that when that lucky moment happens, that you're like ready for it.
Yeah, exactly. And you can show, oh, hey, I'm actually a hard worker. Like, this is not just going to fade away.
And so you referenced you're going to be taking over the shop and kind of rebranding and kind of making it your own. So as opposed to just, hey, new ownership, business as usual, it's going to be drastic changes based on your vision. I'd love to learn more about kind of what your vision for the shop is, where like what inspired you behind your brand and what the shop's going to be like and kind of the vibe you're going for.
So the vibe we're going for, we have an awesome location. It's like right by the lake where I'm from. And so we have these awesome, like huge windows that we can utilize. And we want to kind of take advantage of that space. Our town is very like centered around like the lake, and like our downtown is that way. And so we kind of want to capture that, but still making it modern because, you know, it's an old town and there's not a lot of new spaces. So we want to kind of just repaint, fresh colors, new furniture, make it like soft and welcoming, but still like, oh, it's kind of rustic. You have the beams exposed. There's concrete floors, like there's butcher block countertops. So some of those like newer elements, but still mixing it with the homey feel that the community really loves. So that's kind of what we're trying to be centered around, is the community in mind, but still making it clean and modern.
How much do you let the existing coffee drinking population determine like your menu, your program, your feel versus creating something of your own that's a little bit more of a risk and like hoping that you find that like a new customer base potentially?
So you kind of got to balance that, because there's always going to be people that like have been customers, like existing customers that are going to be kind of like grumpy, you could say, about menus changing. Like, oh, they want it to be the same.
People will always find an excuse to be upset about it.
Exactly. So it's just a balance of like, hey, I think it'd be really cool if we offered some new like Red Bull drinks that are more kind of like a Minneapolis trend and brought that to northern Minnesota. And hopefully you can grab some of those new customers, but then keeping the traditional classic drinks around that people already love. So, you know, one day if they don't feel adventurous, they can go back to their like traditional mocha that they see on any other menu. But if they are feeling risky, they can try something else or walk inside and try new beans as well, like different types of coffee. And bringing that to the community is really important. So
yeah, because it's an interesting situation to take over an existing shop, because sometimes when you start a shop from scratch out of a location, you have no idea what is the foot traffic going to be, how many customers are captured from that foot traffic, like what is how much volume can I expect to go through? Some of those things are almost like not even projections. It's literally what's happening.
Exactly.
So you have this unique position that you kind of know what all these factors are, and you can like attempt to grow on that. And so I'm curious, from the coffee menu and the program now at the shop that exists there today versus what you're looking to do with your coffee program. What are your kind of what focus are you going to have in terms of your selections of coffee drinks, and is there anything like unique or different that you're looking to do that somebody might not expect out of a traditional coffee shop?
So I guess the direction we're trying to take with our menu, just specifically in the coffee region, is making sure that we have different origins available just for black coffee too, because that's going to be a majority of our market is black coffee drinkers. Those are the people that are going to come to your shop every single day. So making sure that, oh, hey, we do have more than one different kind of coffee, and you're going to know what you're drinking, what origin it is, whether it's a blend. So people get excited about that. I feel like a lot of different coffee shops don't necessarily talk about what their coffee actually is. So making sure that our customer base is knowledgeable about what they're drinking if they want to, but then also for the people that just want some sugar, they can have some sugar with espresso. Like diving back to having creative names as well. I feel like when I was younger and first starting to drink coffee, there was a lot of like, oh, Snicker lattes, turtle lattes, like fun stuff like that. And now it's kind of changed back to, this is our flavor list. This is a latte. This is what you can put in a latte. But then giving creativity back to the people so they're not so confused. Like a lot of people don't know what tastes good together. What tastes good with espresso? Does hazelnut or like pecan taste better with espresso? And giving them that option already on the menu, like, oh, hey, we think pecan tastes really good with chocolate, which tastes really good with this type of caramel and with this kind of espresso. So it kind of takes that confusion out of it just by bringing it to them.
And it's interesting because when I was a barista, it was amazing to me how a lot of people really don't know what they're ordering.
Exactly.
It's like they hear the word latte or cappuccino, they order it once at the shop and they go, okay, I like this, I'll order this forever, but I really don't know what it is.
Right, exactly. And I've noticed that, especially in my area with coffee shops, is we kind of throw the fun menus out the door because they don't want to do it, and they're just like, here's just a latte and flavor, make it yourself. But some people don't want to do that. They just want to hear something fun and order it and then go on to work.
Yeah, it's like I'm not trying to use my morning to make more decisions.
Exactly.
I don't want more decisions to think about in the morning. So that'll be that'll be really interesting, the contrast between black coffee drinkers. And it actually is difficult to find shops outside of the city that have multiple origins that they're serving.
Exactly. Or they don't talk about what origins are in their coffee. They just kind of put a name to it like, oh, this is our morning blend, this is our afternoon blend, that's all we serve every day. Yeah,
and that's kind of something Folly is based around, is like most people they're not going to nerd out on all the details like I like to. And so that's kind of how we approach it, is like the flavor profiles of our coffee is what most people are going to be looking for, but we want to make sure that we still have all of that information available. Exactly. Because those are the customers, the ones that like want to know everything. They're the ones that are going to run around town going like, this is the shop right here.
Exactly. and this is why.
And I know that because I'm that annoying coffee friend where somebody's like, I'm going to go to this shop, and you're like, no. Here's the list of shops you can go to.
That are good.
Yeah, and so that's really cool. Do you have a name picked out and like a brand concept?
So it's going to be Coffee District. We're still building on the brand direction, but as I've mentioned, we really want to be community focused with our brand and making sure that we integrate what our population will like. And we're kind of a tourist town. We're kind of a college town, so we have a mix of all different ages that go through, and just offering something for everybody. Offer like fancy Red Bull drinks to college students while still offering regular coffee for just the people that just want their cup of joe. Yeah. So at this point, how far into it are you? Like from the moment you figured out this is available to where you are now, how much time has been put into this? I want to say 2 months. So we have like a business plan already laid out. We'll be signing paperwork here in the next couple of weeks for April, and our grand opening goal is around like April 15th is when, so we have like 2 weeks to reno everything and do the rebrand, and then we'll open our doors. So we want to have everything prepared so it's as easy as a transition as we can possibly make it. So right now we're in the phase of like taking all our grand dreams and ideas and pretty much just putting it to the logistics of numbers and what permits do you need? What insurance do you need? How is that going to fit in with how much money you have for the actual startup? And that's kind of the phase that I'm at right now, is getting all of those nitty-gritty details on paper. Do you have any background in this kind of work? Because it seems like you know, like all the steps are very smooth and planned out. And like, I mean this in the best way because I love coffee people, but generally coffee people are like, I don't know what's going on. Like, plans have really changed like a lot in the last couple weeks. Originally, we were planning on buying the building, and then we're like, oh, wait, that's way more expensive than we had originally planned. And so I'm really trying to get to the point where it's all laid out, but it's definitely been a roller coaster ride of figuring out, because when you look on how to start a coffee shop, everybody just talks about, oh, here's the menus, here's like what people like, here's what customers like, but it's not really talked about of like, this is the health permits that you need. This is the 3 different types of insurances you need for like your employees and your building and your business, and you need how many entities, and all the stuff that makes people want
to not open a coffee shop.
Exactly. So that information was so hard to find, even on like the Minnesota website for business owners, and getting into that, it's still very scattered, and there's still like missing pieces that I've had to find out just from other business owners. And I've been really lucky to have such like an open boss with his business right now to be like, oh, hey, you're going to need this permit. Oh, hey, you're going to need this many employees to be safe serve certified and things like that. And I think without that help, it would be so much more confusing.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it does feel like, oh, I don't know what's going on at all, because it is hard to find that information. Because that's not the fun stuff. Like when you open a coffee shop, that's like the last thing you want to think about is what kind of permits you need. But you have to think about it.
That stuff. I had the opposite approach. It was I had no idea what was going on when we were building the original roaster out in Silver Lake. It was like every time I talked to somebody, you learn something new. That like you need this 3 compartment sink, and I was like, we don't have dishes. They're like, you still need it.
Exactly.
That is the type of stuff that it's so hard to find, because if you look up like business plans or whatever, you kind of find people like you said that it's like here's the menu you can do and the fun stuff and the stuff that people want to think about in opening a coffee shop, and not all the nitty gritty details. When you started managing the coffee shop, what was it like doing the shift from barista to manager? Because that is such a huge advantage in opening your own place. And I've talked to a couple people that have gone from manager to ownership. I just had Ben on the podcast who owns Fragment Coffee in Minneapolis. And it's funny because when I talk to managers that open shops, they seem much more nonchalant about it, because they're like, I mean,
I've been doing this.
It's like basically the same job. It happens to be my place now. What was that jump to go like from barista to manager?
I guess a little difficult, just in the sense of you have to make sure that as far as your employees, making sure that they're on the same team as you, and it's not like I'm in charge now. So making that transition, I would say, was harder than actually doing the job, because you just got to get used to it. At first, it's going to take you 10 times as long to take inventory and to like do all your POS stuff and do orders. It's going to take you so much longer. But a month into it, you get used to all that stuff, and it's more on focusing about your team and making sure that they're on the same page as you and they're supporting you, because if they don't support you in your transition, then your whole team just kind of falls apart. And that's, customer service is your storefront. That's what your customers are seeing. And so that, I think, was the biggest transition, less on the logistics of the job itself. But it was pretty, I don't want to say easy. Like, there's a lot of hardships that go with that, and making sure you're doing stuff right and dealing with money and making sure that you got your numbers right. But that stuff takes time to learn. But after you learn it, it's kind of second nature.
Yeah. With hiring, are you even beginning to think about that yet, being this far out, being, five-ish months out from that? Have you started to think about like hiring, or like how you're going to hire, or the type of people you're going to be looking for?
Yeah, so it's been on my mind. I haven't started hiring. It's a little too soon. I want to make sure that people can be trained properly and have the space to be trained properly. But I'm going to kind of use the same training or hiring method that I do now, which is pretty chill. I don't like to necessarily grill people or have too many questions. I really just like to sit down and have a conversation with my baristas and see like, oh, is this a community you want to be involved in, or do you just kind of want money? Because there's a difference, and it's good to have both. Obviously, people need to pay their bills, but at the same time, you can always train somebody a little bit more on how to steam milk and how to pull a shot and how to brew coffee the correct way. But you can't make somebody like the environment. You can't make somebody like to work in a coffee shop. That's something that they have to bring to the table, as far as being the right personality to fit, and making sure that, hey, I'm okay with making conversation with 100 to 200 strangers every single day. So I'll probably start doing that closer to our renovation date. So then we can build that team, and we'll have people who have barista experience, people that don't, because it's good to have a good balance. But we definitely want to make sure that we have people that have experience in it already, so they feel confident going into, a rebranded place with a new menu where no one has worked there for very long. So that'll be what I'm focused on and looking for in employees when the time comes.
In taking over an existing shop, do you anticipate kind of keeping the same customer base, or do you think that the rebrand and menu change will potentially change who's coming through?
Both. I'm hoping that we can keep some of those people that come regularly because they are the core of that shop right now. But it would be nice, too, to get people excited about something new and be able to bring existing customers with new customers who want to try, like, different drinks that they haven't seen before or different coffee origins that they haven't seen before. So I'm anticipating a little bit of both.
Yeah. In terms of your own personal preferences when it comes to coffee, what are the most exciting things to you within coffee in terms of your favorite drinks or preparation methods? What are the things that get like you the most excited in the coffee world?
Espresso.
Yeah.
Espresso gets me the most excited, whether it's just like drinking it plain. I'm like a double shot every single day kind of person. So I really like plain espresso, but also being able to cater to those people that don't like plain espresso. So I really love experimenting with different flavors and different types of milks in drinks and seeing what you can do with espresso because it can be put in so many different kinds of things.
Do you know with your plan yet if you're going to offer like multiple varieties of espresso, or have you thought that far ahead yet?
I have, in my heart wants to, but I know that most people don't care about it. So that might be something that I incorporate later. So we'll start with one main core espresso, and then maybe this summer we'll do like another launch of an extended branch at different types of beans and different types of espresso for people to choose from.
Yeah, the logistics of it are you need the additional grinder or you're single grinding every single shot, which can be a bit labor intensive, and then factor in dialing in another espresso, and then depending on which type of espresso machine you have, can you dial the group heads for serving different espressos? So something like single origin espresso is like very exciting to have, but logistically it does add a lot of steps and equipment needed, which is really funny when you think about like the intense work that goes into a great shot of espresso. I was just talking to you at the roaster that like I think espresso is like the ultimate coffee like experience. It's like the roasting has to be perfect, the shot pull has to be perfectly extracted, and just like everything about it's like a magnifying glass on the entire process that if anything's off, it is like it's heartbreaking. Like
it is heartbreaking. All of a sudden you have a bitter, sour little cup of coffee that you didn't want.
Yeah, and I think that's it is something that I wish more shops had like single origin offerings, but I also understand from the logistics side that like you're catering to like the customer that's me, the one out of every 100 that's amped about it, but you go, that's a lot of things to have in place for that one customer. It's kind of, and that's where it gets tough in this balance where you go, how it's like a chicken or the egg, where if we introduce it, will people get interested, or do we have to wait until they're like demanding that we do it? And it would be interesting because you're in northern Minnesota, like the coffee drink how hard is it to find like a great cup of coffee in the area that you're from?
So I would say over the last couple of years, it's been a lot easier. We went from having like 4 coffee shops to having over 10. So yeah, there's a lot of variety. And so I'd say out of those 10, you could probably find 4 good cups of coffee, 2 really good cups of coffee.
We'll leave out the bad ones.
Exactly. We'll leave out the bad ones, but not that they're terrible by any means, but if you're really, really looking for that quality cup, you can tell the difference between what kind of bean they're using, or if they're outsourcing it from days ago, or if it's like fresh and they really went through the process of picking their coffee.
With that many shops opening, how's the reception been from the town, especially in these places that you consider like let's just take these 2 examples you're talking about, the great cup of coffee. How has the customer like reception been to these types of places that are doing all the steps necessary to really prepare great coffee? Oh,
people love it. People will most likely, or not most likely, they will go out of their way on certain days to get that great cup of coffee. And they notice that, and they get more curious about it too as they see new shops come in that are spending more time picking their coffee or even roasting in-house, and they want to know more about it and they get hyped about it. So I guess that's kind of their reaction to all, like, the good, better, best.
Yeah. And that's always been an interesting thought experiment is like, sometimes I think people go, we have to do like as close to Starbucks as possible because that's what people are used to. But I'm like, but then you're competing with Starbucks and like, they're a beast. And so
they're a beast. They're never going down. I don't know.
Yeah. And so to try to do anything similar to them is, to me, is like good luck if that's the kind of the style you're going for. And so I love when shops like yours approach us because I'm like, yes, this is like, we can do it in a way and like roast these coffees like we tasted our dark roast today, where you're like, yes, technically it's a dark roast, but the way we do it, it holds up on its own. It's just, it's like, finding a great coffee shop in a new area is such an exciting thing. And especially, I assume like cabin traffic's probably pretty big up north. And obviously being a college town, that like becoming a place to get people to go out of their way for a great cup of coffee. Like once you have a great cup, it's so hard to go back.
Exactly, because it always lingers in the back of your mind.
Yeah. And it's almost like most people have never had a great cup of coffee. And we would do samplings in grocery stores when that was allowed. And it's so funny that like you, like the house bean we were tasting today, like these big red berry notes, you say that and people are like, I'm not going to taste that. And then they go, oh, I actually taste that in this coffee. And it's those light bulb experiences with being that it sounds like you're going to be focusing on like obviously higher quality coffee. How much of like do you think about the potential like education opportunities or like being able to get customers educated on what they're drinking? How do you plan on like communicating that best to the customer in terms of like you said you're very excited about like expressing origins of the coffee, roast profiles, like what is in your cup? How do you plan on kind of interacting with customers to be able to educate them on that?
It starts with first training your baristas so they know. So when they get asked questions, it's not like let me go ask my manager.
Which is usually the case.
Exactly. So making sure that your barista is trained on what they're serving, but then put something on your menu that's like, hey, ask us what you're drinking today. And then most people will. It's surprising to see how many people will ask like, oh, what are you roasting? Why are you roasting this? So just making sure that you have well-trained staff so they can answer those questions when they come up, I think is the core of it.
I like that approach of asking the customer or like you almost give the customer permission. That's like, we don't find this annoying. Because that's always my biggest thing is like, I obviously will ask every question I can if you give me the opportunity, but you go into some shops and you're like, I don't know if I don't want to waste their time. You know, they've seen, like you said, they've talked to 100 to 200 strangers today. I'm sure they don't want to talk about this, but even just having something up there, like ask us what you're drinking today is an awesome way of like, here's permission that, hey, we want to talk to you about this. And it also lets them know that, hey, we will actually have an answer for you.
Right, exactly.
Because that's something I run into a lot where people are like, I think it might be a light roast. And you're like, okay.
You're like, sure. I guess we'll find out together.
Do you have any like personal favorite styles of coffee or origins that you gravitate towards?
I really want to try Kona coffee. That's something that I'm like gravitating towards, but I really love South American single origins. I'm a French press kind of person when it comes to specific types of coffee, but you know, sometimes life is really busy and I just pop in a Keurig pod and gotta go through my day. But black coffee is usually where I go and adding cream sugar to it. So that would be my favorite style. Yeah,
South America is an interesting region for coffee because like Colombia is Jeff's. If you were to ask Jeff, our head roaster, like if you could only drink coffee from one country, which would it be? And he says Colombia, and he's like, why? It's like, because so many different styles of coffee come out of Colombia and the surrounding regions that you can find coffees like we had today from Colombia or from Brazil that's nutty, chocolatey, but then you find these other coffees growing at high altitudes that have these bright acidity. Like we're just sourcing one from the Nariño region. And it's like you wouldn't even know this is the same country. And so South America is like an extremely compelling coffee growing region in terms of the range of flavor profiles. And that's another thing that I've found in educating customers is they want really simple answers that like, oh, this is Colombian coffee, so it tastes like this. And it's like a rabbit hole of like, where do you kind of draw the line of like, this is how much we can tell them. Do you find shops in the area doing that in terms of expressing what the origin is, educating customers, or is that something that you're looking to kind of introduce to the community?
So there definitely are coffee shops that already do that. And I think that's why is because the community has shown such an interest in that. So we're not necessarily introducing it to them. We're just kind of making sure that we are also educated on what we're serving to people as well.
And when you relaunch, do you have like a marketing effort lined up of how you're going to get the word out? Because that's another thing it's intriguing taking over an existing shop. Because in theory, you could kind of not have to do that because you're like, people already know there's a coffee shop here. We already have the foot traffic. We know how many people are coming through. So how much of your focus is towards getting the word out that you're now open?
So social media is a huge thing, and also like structuring it so customers that are coming in already know, oh, hey, this place is closing down and there's a new place coming in. So just sharing that with existing customers and then doing a transition on social media where it's like, hey, this is our rebrand that we're doing. This is our goal for that. And word of mouth and social media together, I think, will be a really great way to spread the word.
What's it like in your town in April, being kind of a college town, kind of a summer destination? What's it like opening in April? Do you think that's like a good time to open, or is it kind of just when it happened?
So we kind of did it in that way. So it would be January and February is dead.
Smart.
For everybody. And so we wanted to do it in a way where it wouldn't be the middle of summer, so staff wouldn't be overwhelmed because business just goes crazy in my town in the summer. So we wanted to have that like middle spring season. So it was planned that way. Intentionally. So it would be a good time to close because you're not losing so much business, and a good time to reopen because there's going to be medium traffic where baristas will get to be comfortable serving to actual customers, but then it'll pick up and hopefully be able to support itself through the entire year, and we'll be able to save money for those winter months if we're not doing as well as we thought. So it was strategically planned that way.
It feels like a good month, and because opening in January, you'd be like, this was the worst idea ever. It's just how everything goes. Yeah, but I was telling Jeff that, I was like, I mean, January, we might as well not even be open. Like, we might as well not even roast because things just drop off so dramatically. I suppose because you've managed shops, a lot of the difficulties that people run into in terms of staff management and like scheduling and all that is, has your experience managing just made you comfortable with those aspects of running and owning a shop? Yeah,
that's the most comfortable part of this whole thing that I am with, just because I am familiar with it. And with baristas, they're always coming and going, and just I'm so happy I know how to balance that. Knowing that, hey, baristas aren't going to want to stick around for decades. You know, sometimes you're just a stepping stone for their next path. And so I'm so happy that I know how to manage those schedules, because it's going to be the easiest part. I feel like sometimes when people start from scratch and don't have a lot of experience, it's hard to balance, I have to focus on the money and the profit and make sure that we can like pay rent and buy inventory, but then, hey, I have this barista that all of a sudden wants a month off, and I've never had to deal with somebody just dropping off like that. So it'll be nice to just focus on helping the business grow while feeling really comfortable with, hey, I know how to manage staff already. Yeah, because that is the part that I think a lot of people underestimate, the amount of time and focus. I mean, we were just doing weekend tasting and tours, and we have a team of like 5 people, one shift a week, and I'm still like, I am so bad at this. Like, I feel so bad for our team sometimes that they have to deal with me scheduling, because I forget like every third thing I say. You being super comfortable with hiring is such like a good foundation for owning and running a shop, because I think, like we were alluding to earlier, that like the attractive aspects of running a shop, of like, look at us preparing drinks, like look at this cool picture, versus like, those are cool, but it's really like scheduling and like having a good team, an educated team, sounds like things you're all going to be focusing on, which is really exciting. Like an educated team, especially when it comes to coffee. Obviously, I'm very biased, but it's like such a nice extra layer to know that you're getting coffee from people who really know what they're serving you, which is like a really nice touch. So you mentioned you're going to take over the existing social media of the shop that exists now. Not quite. So we're going to kind of structure it so they will be kind of leading their followers and their customer base to a new page.
Okay.
So we can kind of try to move it over. I mean, some people will like that, some people won't. That's just how I've accepted that's how it's going to be. So we will be starting our own social media and marketing that way.
Outside of the coffee menu, what kind of things are you going to be offering?
So we'll have like pastries, we'll have like paninis, we want to have wraps, we want to get into kind of donuts. In the summer, we'd want to do ice cream. So outside of that, outside of coffee, we're going to try to also be kind of like a one-stop shop where, hey, if you're on your lunch break, you can get coffee and you can get food. So you don't have to go to multiple places.
Yeah, that's so key. It's like having a good, like solid food program. And how are you going to kind of keep your choices of like what type of paninis and how, I just get fascinated by like you go into a lot of shops and they seem to have a very similar menu and my brain goes like who came up with that? Who came up with this menu first? You know what I mean? So where do you pull your ideas from of this is what we should be serving at this time of the year?
Going through just like what vendors have available to us and then what our community has shown that they like, as well as like my existing team right now, they love to create their own things and kind of bouncing ideas even off of them to see, hey, if you were going to go to a different coffee shop, what would you like and what would you order? Because sure, I could create the whole menu by myself, but I'm biased in what I like. And so trying to just ask people and bounce ideas off of people like, would you try apples on a ham panini? Is that something that you would like? And kind of going from there. So a mixture of, hey, this is what I like. This is what this person likes. Let's marry it together. Let's have 5 different options for paninis. Let's have 4 different options for wraps. Also having like veggie options for people because we want to make sure that there's something for everybody. So that's where the ideas come from. Also just researching to what other coffee shops have available and kind of seeing, oh, this is their most popular thing. We don't want to copy them, but how do we incorporate those core favorites that people do like into our menu, but making it new?
In like pricing and like on like the financial side, how has that been to take on? Because my experience in business ownership is like everything is always way more expensive than I project.
Oh yeah.
And so I started projecting everything as like way more than, and it still is way. And on the financial side and like the way you're pricing things out, where did you pull from? Like, was it your management experience or did you have to kind of go out and find resources to be able to figure out how everything works in terms of what should I be paying for rent, for the shop, for these pieces of equipment, all these different variables involved? How much of that did you plan ahead for, and how much of it has been like, oh, things keep coming up? Things
do keep coming up. You're definitely right. It just, when it comes to financing, there's always something that's going to pop up. You might think that, bread isn't that expensive, but then you go, oh, hey, panini bread actually is 10 times as more expensive as I thought. So first, I kind of went about it by creating our menu, like a skeleton, and being like, this is what I would like to serve. And then looking at different vendor prices and going, oh, this is what Cisco has. This is what US Foods has. This is what some other smaller local vendors have to offer, and then comparing those prices and literally breaking it down per serving and going, oh, hey, this is what we're paying for this. This is what we want to make this much margin. So marking it up like that, but also going, okay, if I were a customer, like separate myself from this business for a minute, would I pay this much for this product? And so I guess a little bit of using my management experience, but also just kind of winging it to try and figure out what prices would be best and making sure that I'm not overpaying for something. As far as like rent and building goes, just comparing what other businesses can like pay for in our area is the only way that I kind of saw, oh, this is a good price to pay for this location. But outside of that, it's kind of hard to research stuff like that because everyone's in a different market. So you could be looking at, oh, this coffee shop in California is paying 10 times as me, but obviously their market is different. So just looking on like Zillow and seeing what other people are paying and looking at what I should be paying.
And as you're getting connected with like distributors, are you already connected with them because of your work and like you're managing a shop and so you already have these relationships, or how did you go about approaching them about even finding out their pricing?
So a little bit of my management experience has helped me, but at some point, like the owner does a lot of that too. So he has built the core vendor relationships and I just kind of help him as far as like putting in the order. So there's not a ton of communication with my current job. So just reaching out to people and just asking questions is the best way that I've found to build those relationships and be like, oh, hey, this is my plan. This is what I'm trying to achieve. can we do a win-win where, hey, you get a new customer and I get an awesome vendor?
Yeah. And I mean, just the way you communicated it, like it was super buttoned up, because we'll get random inquiries of like, hey, I'm thinking about opening a shop. Like, can you tell me everything? And I'm like, huh? Like, I just, I was thinking about it. And you're like, how? And you like, you want to support someone thinking about it. But like when you approached with that email, it was like, oh, this is like, things are buttoned up and this is moving already, which is exciting to see. And as you're talking, it's like the organization seems to be pretty thorough. And when you're reaching out to these distributors, are they cool with you just being like, hey, I'm going to be taking over a shop, I need pricing? Or
most of the time, yeah, people are pretty chill with just giving you information and making sure that they're there to help you along the way. And I haven't run into an issue with that yet. I'm sure that I will, just because the more people you communicate, the more people will be like, hey, we want you to be more serious about this before we give you pricing information. But so far, everyone has been super supportive of that.
Yeah, I think the fact that you have a location, you have a timeline, were the two things to me that I was like, oh, this is like, let's get you down here. Let's taste some coffee. Like, this thing is moving. And it's funny because April sounds really far away, but it's going to be like that.
Oh, yeah.
And so to be able to have like these details in terms of vendors, especially, I feel like a lot of people probably just go, we're going to have this on the menu. It's going to be this price, without going through all those details, which it's like just keeping margin is so important. And like making sure that that's backing the entire menu it's a recurring theme in our conversation here. That's like, it's not the fun stuff that everybody,
has to be done.
Yeah, but it's like the stuff that has to be done to keep the wheels moving.
I'm glad I sound organized.
No,
I feel like
super buttoned up about it. Like it's like all these details. I get like a combination of excitement and nervousness when I hear of someone like yourself opening their own shop or starting their own business, because I've been through it and I continue to go through it, where it's like, I mean, this is a flaw of mine that I tend to kind of start something and then figure out how it works.
I kind of did
that
in a way, because like when you're starting just talking about it, it is kind of just like in that dream state of like, oh, I want this. And then when someone brings you an opportunity, or when you work for that opportunity, you have that kind of moment where you're like, oh, this is happening. Like, I actually have to get organized. I actually have to figure out all this nitty gritty stuff, else it's just going to fall apart in front of me. So it's definitely been up and down of trying to figure out everything.
What's it feel like now? Does it feel real yet? Or like, how does it feel being 4 or 5 months out from the full transition into the new brand? Which also I want to come back to the name Coffee District, which is badass. How you came up with that?
Sometimes it feels real. Like sometimes I'll be like, oh, wow, it's 4 months. And then other times I'm like, oh, yeah, this is just what I'm doing. Like, no big deal. And then I go from that to, oh, wow, this is a really big deal. I better figure out more logistics and actually start testing some of these things out and talking to more people and getting more things signed. And then I'll go back to, oh, this is kind of fun. This is nice. Nice little dream I'm having. It'll be interesting. I hope we can line up another episode after you open. It'll be fun to go back and kind of talk 4 months out. What didn't you expect? What's happening up to this point? Are there any like major unexpected things that have occurred as you're planning and getting the plans in place to open up? So I mentioned before we were planning on buying the building. And I think that was the biggest change, was we went from buying the building and preparing for that and literally almost signing that paperwork to going, oh, we really do not have enough startup funds for this, to backing out of that and being able to work with the owner on, oh, hey, we can rent the building and we will possibly own the building later. And so that was the biggest shift of just realizing, oh, hey, we're going to have to change direction kind of on how we're doing this. So instead of talking to banks about mortgages and things like that, now we're just trying to structure like startup funds. So that was the biggest shift, and that just recently happened. It was literally, we were going to sign paper the next day, and we were kind of running the numbers over and over again and realizing how it just wouldn't be a smart idea. And so that has been the biggest change that we'd seen as far as like business planning goes.
Sometimes it's so hard to make those decisions because so much work has gone into it that you kind of want to you kind of want to just go, but we've done so much work, we might as well just do it even if it doesn't make sense. It's like the theory of sunken costs, that like a lot of people will do something just because they've spent so much time on it. So it's super smart to, like, if it doesn't make sense, even if it's like so close and so much work has been put into it, to back out if it's the right move. And sometimes those are way harder to make even if it makes sense. I'm excited to have you back after opening. Hopefully we can work together, all that good stuff. But
Yes.
I really appreciate you coming in.
Yeah.
It was a fun 1 hour detour in between the roaster and
Oh
here
my
with
gosh.
so the backstory on that is your phone's at 1%. This is for the listeners at this point, but phone's at 1%. You're like, my phone's going to die, but I'll just follow you. And then I lost you because I thought you were a different car. And then an hour later, you found a new charging cord and called, and all is well in the world.
Exactly. You know, just 20 miles out of the way, just having to find a gas station.
I get to watch that 4:30 p.m. sunset in Minneapolis, which is not where the studio is.
Exactly. Right on the edge of rush hour traffic. I'm so happy I missed that.
Yeah, but I really appreciate you coming down.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
I'm glad you got to come by, check out the space, taste some coffee, being on the podcast, and I'm excited to see where things go.
Yeah. We'll check back in hopefully 4 to 5 months.
We'll see how that feels. I feel like it's going to go fast, but also I feel like I've made a lot of predictions about this year. None of them have been right.
Well, right. Same as everybody else, though.
Exactly. I will end it like I do every other episode and say, have a nice day.